My name is Harper Lane. I served 11 years in the United States Air Force, most of them overseas. I made it to captain before my body gave out, but the damage that lasted longest wasn't physical. It was during my fifth deployment, somewhere outside Al Udeid, when I got the email. I was conducting a routine logistics check when my comms officer handed me a tablet, a look of concern on his face. The subject line just read, "Decision." It wasn't a mission update or bad news from home. It was from my father. One sentence. No greeting, no explanation. Come home and take care of your brother, or be cut off for good. I read it twice, then locked the screen and handed the device back. I didn't reply right away. I just kept walking, slow and steady, like nothing had cracked inside me. But something had. Not because I wanted what he was threatening to take away, but because I finally saw how little I'd ever mattered to him. That moment didn't break me. It confirmed what I'd spent years trying not to believe. And it was the start of everything that came after. I grew up in a town where Sundays meant church. Dinner came with sweet tea, and every daughter was expected to smile more than speak. My family lived in an old farmhouse just outside Jackson, Mississippi. Paint peeling, porch sagging, but the rules inside were as stiff as the walls. My father ran that house like he ran his trucking business, with firm hands, sharp words, and an unspoken belief that sons built legacies while daughters held them together quietly in the background. My brother Kyle, 2 years older, was the crown jewel from the minute he took his first steps. He could do no wrong. Crashed a bike? Just a boy being wild. Skipped school? He was just testing limits. I once spilled a glass of milk and got grounded for a week. Dad always said Kyle would take over the business someday, that he had grit, fire, and a name to carry forward. When I brought home straight A's, he barely looked up. "Books won't fix a flat tire," he'd mutter. Mom noticed. Not loud, not in public, but late at night, she'd slip me notes in my lunchbox. Simple things like, "I see you," or "You did well today." Her hands always smelled like soap and cinnamon. She'd sing sometimes when she cooked, soft and low. I'd stand in the doorway just to hear her hum. It was the only warmth in a house that felt colder the older I got. Kyle teased me constantly, called me Harpy instead of Harper, yanked my hair, blamed me for stuff I didn't do, and always got away with it. I tried telling Dad once. He just laughed and told me to toughen up. By the time I hit 16, I stopped talking at dinner. There was no point. Every conversation circled back to Kyle. His baseball stats, his new truck, his college plans. When I said I might want to go out of state, Dad looked like I'd slapped him. "No daughter of mine's running off to find herself," he said. "You want something to do? Help your mother." That was his favorite line. Help your mother. Like she was the only thing holding me back from the world, instead of the only reason I hadn't already left. Mom got sick during my senior year. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and brutal. She shrank in weeks, her voice barely a whisper by the end. But on one of her last good days, she pulled me close and said, "You get out, Harper. You live. Don't let them clip your wings." She passed 3 weeks before graduation. I didn't cry much. I was too tired, too used to swallowing things that didn't have a place in our house. After the funeral, Dad handed Kyle the keys to the truck, gave me a casserole dish to carry to the car. "You're gonna stay home now. Help with things," he said. "Family comes first." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just nodded, packed a bag that night, and caught a ride with a neighbor into town. The recruiter's office opened at 9 a.m. I was there at 8:45. I didn't join the Air Force to be a hero. I joined because I needed space to breathe. Because I was tired of being background noise in my own life. Basic training was the first place anyone ever called me ma'am without smirking. First time I was seen for what I could do, not just what I didn't say. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. When I got my first set of orders, I sent Dad a letter. Short and polite. He never replied. Kyle sent me a text that said, Don't crash a plane. I laughed, but not because it was funny. That was the moment I stopped hoping they'd ever change. I still called on holidays, sent cards, tried to hold a thread between us. But it was thin, fraying fast. I learned to stop waiting for their approval, learned to build my own quiet kind of pride, one deployment at a time, one step away from that house. It came in the middle of a maintenance inspection. We were running checks on fuel lines and hydraulic systems in 90-degree heat. My tech handed me the tablet and said it was flagged urgent. The subject line just said, "Decision." I tapped it open with a thumb still smudged in oil. 2 sentences. No greeting, no sign-off. Come home. Take care of your brother, or be removed from the will. I stared at the screen for maybe 5 seconds. Not because I was surprised, just making sure I read it right. I didn't blink, didn't sigh, didn't let it show. Then I handed the tablet back and said, "Tell comms I'll send my reply." I pulled my glove off, typed a single word, "No." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no room for discussion. I went back to work, wiped sweat from my forehead, double-checked the checklist, and gave a thumbs up to my crew chief. The world didn't stop because a man who barely raised me decided to cut me loose. Again, no one on that tarmac knew what had just happened. No one saw me pause. I didn't give them a reason to. That's the thing about being a woman in uniform. You learn early how to carry pain like it's just weight in your pack. But somewhere under the quiet, there was a sting. Not about the money. I didn't need the inheritance. It was the demand that got me. Like, I still owed them something. Like I'd earned every stripe just to come home and serve a man who never saw me. That night, I stood under a sky thick with stars. Let the wind hit my face. Let the silence fill the space where anger wanted to live. And I promised myself I'd never crawl for love. Not again. The blast came without warning. 1 second, we were laughing over busted rations. The next, smoke filled the sky, and the earth shook. Sergeant Bennett went down before he even had time to scream. I crawled through sand and debris, yelling his name, heart pounding like gunfire. I found him crumpled behind the transport truck. Shrapnel buried deep in his chest. Blood soaked the front of his uniform, and his fingers gripped mine like he still had something to say. I held his dog tags in one hand and whispered his wife's name into his ear. Promised I'd tell her he didn't suffer. Promised I'd carry his story home. That night, I sat beside a crater in silence. I put my rifle across my knees. My hands were stained with someone else's blood. And all I could think about was the dinner table back home. The one where there was never a chair for me. Where my father's voice filled the room like law, and I was expected to nod and stay quiet. I remembered when Kyle smashed my science fair project and got praised for being curious, when I made straight A's and heard nothing at all. I remembered Mom slipping me notes that said, "I'm proud of you," like it was a secret that had to stay hidden. And yet, here, thousands of miles away, a man who wasn't my blood had died in my arms, trusting me, depending on me. We weren't just colleagues. We were family, not by name, by sacrifice. Family, I realized, isn't who you're born to. It's who holds the line with you when everything's falling apart. It's who stays, who listens, who covers your back without asking why. I looked up at the stars, the same ones that hung over Tennessee, and felt something shift inside me. I hadn't lost a family. I'd built one. Out of dust and discipline and pain. One that didn't need me to be silent to be loved. And in that moment, I understood what my father never did. That love isn't obedience, it's presence. It's a choice. And I chose them. Here's the response for part 5.1. Coming back. The house. Harper drove slowly down Willow Lane, the road she used to ride her bike on at dusk. The same map of houses shaded by oak trees she could draw from memory. She wasn't expecting much. Years away, deployments, medals, quiet letters sent and ignored. This wasn't about seeing anyone. She just needed to see the house. The house looked smaller now. White paint chipped, shutters hanging unevenly, lawn overgrown and brown in patches. The porch light was dead. A pickup truck sat in the driveway. Old, gleaming once, but now dusty. Harper parked a few yards down, killed the engine, heart thumping with something she couldn't name. She saw him then. Her father. His hair was a ragged halo around his face, coat several sizes too big, shoes scuffed, knees drawn up as he sat on the curb. Nobody spoke to him. Neighbors passed. A kid on a bike rode by without glancing. He held a paper cup, head down, eyes empty. She felt her chest tighten. For a moment, Harper wondered if she should call out. But years of silence taught her restraint. She watched him, the man who wrote her off, now invisible to everyone else. Shock flickered, a sting of something like relief, or sorrow, or both. She stepped out of the car and closed the door quietly. Didn't hurry. Took off her jacket, held it out, draped it across his shoulders. He flinched, looked up, eyes meeting hers. Recognition flashed, confusion. She did not speak. Then she turned back to the house. The mailbox, the front steps, the windows she used to stare out of at night, and she thought maybe home is not the place you left. Maybe it is what you walk back into, even if everything hurts. Harper walked back to the car and opened the trunk slowly, careful not to make a sound. Inside was a folded military blanket, olive green, thick, the kind that kept you warm, even when the world felt cold. She held it for a second, fingers tracing the edge, like she was still deciding. Then she returned to the curb where her father sat Saturday. He hadn't moved much, just hunched over like someone waiting for time to pass. She didn't speak, didn't crouch, didn't ask if he was okay. She simply unfolded the blanket and draped it over his shoulders. He looked up, startled at first, then stunned. His eyes searched hers, and for a moment, they softened. "Harper," he said, barely above a whisper, like he wasn't sure she was real. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more than words ever could. She stepped back, letting his voice trail off behind her. As she walked away, the air felt still. There was no triumph in it, no bitterness either. Just a quiet act between two people, with too much history and too few words left to say. Some things don't need revenge. Some things just need to be left with a blanket and a little grace. He didn't ask where they were going, just climbed into the passenger seat like it cost him nothing. Harper drove with both hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. Neither of them spoke until she pulled into the small rental house she kept on the edge of town. She unlocked the front door and let him walk in first. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and pine cleaner. She didn't give a tour, just pointed to the guest room down the hall. He carried nothing, just the blanket she'd given him, folded under one arm, like it meant more than he could admit. She had already put fresh sheets on the bed that morning. Not because she planned this, just instinct. Dinner was chicken noodle soup. She made it while he sat in silence at the kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the wall like it might say something. She didn't ask if he was hungry, just set the bowl down in front of him, and one in front of herself. They ate slowly. No small talk. No questions. Just the quiet sound of spoons and breath, and the soft click of the ceiling fan. When he finished, he murmured a thank you without looking up. She nodded once, took both bowls to the sink. It felt like something fragile had been placed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe something that could hold weight if neither of them crushed it. That night, she heard him cough through the wall. Light, ragged, like a man trying not to take up space. She sat on the edge of her bed for a while, staring at the old photo of her mother on the dresser. "This isn't for him," she whispered. "It's for you." Over the next few days, they settled into a rhythm that wasn't really routine. She made breakfast early. He folded the blanket neatly every morning and left it on the end of the couch. Sometimes he'd refill the bird feeder outside without being asked. She kept the conversations short, asked if he needed anything when she went to the store. He'd shake his head or quietly request coffee or toothpaste. No long stories, no apologies. But the house was quieter, in a softer way. Not empty, just still. She caught him, watching her once, while she read at the table. He didn't say anything, just gave a small nod, like he saw something he hadn't before. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away, and that was enough for now. Harper walked into the county courthouse on a rainy Thursday morning, boots tracking water across the marble floor. The clerk behind the glass window didn't flinch when she asked for property records and power of attorney filings under the name Warren. Just slid a stack of folders across, without a word. She sat down at a corner table and started reading, page by page, line by line, letting the ink tell the story no one had spoken aloud. Her father's signature was shaky in the final documents. Dates overlapped with the months she knew he was in and out of the hospital. Then came the power of attorney form. Kyle's name at the top, her father's signature at the bottom. Witness lines were blank. Notarization was dated the same day her father had been admitted to intensive care. It didn't add up. She flipped through more pages, title transfers, account closures, a deed signed over under mental soundness and legalese, yet filed the day after emergency surgery. Kyle had moved fast, covered tracks, counted on no one asking questions. But Harper had questions, and now she had answers. She took photos of everything. Quiet, methodical, her breath steady even as her jaw tightened. This wasn't anger, this was certain. The kind of stillness that settles in when the fog clears and you see the road for what it is. Back at home, she placed the copies in a file. Labeled it Truth. She didn't tell her father right away. She watched him sleep in the recliner, blanket still tucked around his legs. He didn't know what she knew, not yet. But in her chest, something shifted. Not bitterness, not even betrayal, just confirmation that what had happened to him and to her wasn't imagined. She had spent years thinking the silence was a kind of cruelty. Turns out, it was just a cover. And now the cover was off. Justice didn't mean dragging Kyle through the mud, it meant naming what had been hidden, bringing the truth into daylight where it couldn't be ignored. She owed herself that much. And maybe, just maybe, her father too. Harper found the firm through a friend in her old unit. A legal outfit run by veterans, quiet professionals who understood when not to ask too many questions. Their office sat above a hardware store. No fancy signage, just results. She brought them the file labeled Truth and explained what she had found. No drama, no tears. Just dates, signatures, inconsistencies, and motive. They listened, took notes, asked smart questions, promised discretion. She told them it wasn't about revenge. It was about doing what was right, before more damage could be done. She spent evenings combing through old bank records, emails, and utility bills. Her father didn't know the details, but he saw the light on in her room late and the printer warming up at dawn. He never asked. Instead, he began walking to the mailbox each morning. At first, he needed the cane, then not as much. One afternoon, she found the dishes already done. Another time, he folded laundry without being asked. There was a moment in the kitchen when he handed her a mug of coffee. He didn't speak, but his eyes were softer, the way her mother's had been when she was holding back tears. Harper took the mug and nodded once. That was all they needed. The firm filed the initial motion quietly. They notified the probate court of potential fraud and began pulling transcripts of Kyle's transactions. Every move was careful, precise, like defusing a bomb. Harper refused interviews and declined calls from local reporters once the news broke. Her name never appeared in the press. That was on purpose. Let Kyle fight shadows. Let the truth speak without her voice. Back home, the air shifted. Her father started reading again. History books, old westerns, anything he could find. Sometimes he'd leave one open for her, on the porch swing. She never asked why. Just read them. He mowed the lawn one Saturday without saying a word. Came inside with sweat down his back and asked if she needed anything from the store. It was the first time he'd offered help in years. One night, Harper caught him, sitting alone in the living room, staring at a picture of her mother. He didn't notice her watching. He wiped his eyes once and sat still for a long time. The case moved forward, slowly but steadily. Depositions, notarized testimonies. Witnesses from the hospital confirmed her father's condition during the filings. The truth began to stitch itself together like an old quilt, messy, uneven, but real. Justice wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, but it was moving, and Harper could feel it. Not like a storm, more like a tide pulling everything back to balance. She didn't need her father to apologize. She didn't need Kyle to break down. What she needed was to know she hadn't imagined it. That what happened mattered. That she mattered. And piece by piece, she was proving it. Without shouting, without rage, just the quiet, steady force of someone who refused to be erased. It began at 9:03 a.m. on a Tuesday. Kyle's business accounts were frozen without warning. The banks received court orders citing financial misconduct tied to probate fraud and forged documents. By noon, his attorney's inbox was full. Civil suits, IRS alerts, a federal investigation notice stamped with a case number, and a quiet warning not to travel out of state. The paperwork didn't scream. It whispered. Every move had been timed, deposits tracked, signatures analyzed. The team Harper hired had built the case like engineers, precise and patient, until every bolt was ready to snap at once. Kyle didn't know any of it yet. He was boarding a flight to Dallas, suit bag in hand, on his way to the state banking gala. He thought the night would be his stage. Press, donors, future clients, all eyes on the man who built a company from scratch. Harper arrived at the hotel just after 7. Her dress was simple, navy blue. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except for her service pin tucked inside her coat pocket. She moved through the lobby like someone who didn't need to be noticed. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers. Waiters moved in formation. The stage was set with gold trim and soft jazz. Kyle stood near the podium, drink in hand. Charming as ever, she walked in slowly. Eyes scanned her, but didn't recognize her at first. Then he did. For half a second his smile held, then it faltered. She didn't wave, didn't approach, just stood across the room and met his gaze like a mirror. His phone buzzed once. Then again. A third time. He reached for it, glanced, and froze. His jaw tightened. He turned slightly, as if to step away. She held her place. Across the ballroom, 2 men in dark suits entered and spoke to the event coordinator. One pointed toward Kyle. No scene, no raised voices, just quiet instruction. Harper stepped aside as they moved past her. No need to follow. Her part was already done. The coordinator whispered something to Kyle. He nodded once, too fast. His face was pale. His hands trembled as he handed off his drink. He was escorted out through a side hallway, not in cuffs, but as good as. She watched him disappear behind the velvet curtain. The music didn't stop. Guests murmured, confused but curious. She turned and left, before anyone could ask questions. Her heels clicked against the marble, even and measured, like the tick of a clock running out. Outside, the night was clear. No wind, no noise. Just the feeling of balance restored. Not through fire, through silence. Harper didn't smile, but she exhaled, long and slow. Justice hadn't raised its voice. It didn't need to. It just walked into a room and let the truth speak for itself. Kyle Warren didn't fall in one day. He unraveled slowly, like a thread pulled from a suit too tight for truth. The first thing to go was his name. Clients stopped calling. The board of directors held a silent vote. He was out before he knew he'd been replaced. His office was cleared by assistants who didn't look him in the eye. No farewell party, no thank you note, just a locked door and a severance packet signed with pity. Local banks withdrew endorsements. The Chamber of Commerce removed his photo from the wall. One by one, the small pillars of his status sank beneath him. In court, he showed up polished and tense. But the calm unraveling of facts made him smaller with each hearing. Not evil, just exposed. Witnesses testified. Records were read aloud. He tried to explain, then tried to deny, then said nothing at all. The courtroom never shouted. It didn't have to. His own silence did the work. By summer, the papers ran only small headlines. Businessman found liable in probate fraud. No mugshot. No protests. Just a quiet end to a long illusion. Neighbors stopped waving. Old friends stopped inviting. Even the waitress at his favorite diner gave him the check without asking if he wanted dessert. He lived, but less. Spoke, but softer. A man who once demanded the room now avoided its corners. There was no revenge, no ruin, just truth. And truth, once loose, didn't need to scream. It just stayed. The final court ruling came on a quiet Thursday morning. Harper sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, coffee cooling beside her. Her father pulled up a chair without asking, the way he did now. The judge's voice came through the speakers measured, formal, and final. Kyle would repay the stolen funds, surrender remaining assets, and serve probation under financial supervision. No appeal. No escape. Her father said nothing as the screen went black. He just exhaled, slow and steady, then stood to rinse his mug. Harper reached for her phone and sent a single email to her attorney with instructions. Every cent of the restitution would go to veteran housing programs. No spotlight, no press release. That afternoon, she found him in the shed looking for gloves. She didn't speak, just handed him the trowel and knelt beside the row of wilting hydrangeas. They worked in silence, pulling weeds, loosening soil. The sun sat low behind them, warm on their backs. He moved more slowly now, but with care. She trimmed the old branches, steady and precise. It wasn't about the garden. It was about tending something that still had a chance. When they finished, he straightened up and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," he said. Harper nodded. "I know." They didn't hug. They didn't need to. What was broken had been named. What could heal was already beginning. Later, she sat on the back porch, boots kicked off, the smell of dirt still on her hands. Forgiveness didn't feel like a gift she had given him. It felt like something she had chosen for herself. A release, a clearing of weight. She thought of her mother, of the girl who once whispered dreams into pillows, of the woman who chose the sky over silence. Harper had never needed anyone to rescue her. She had simply needed room to rise. Justice hadn't made her whole, but it had made things honest. And that, sometimes, is more powerful than closure. The garden would bloom again, maybe not today, but soon. And that was enough.